Hello, this is the After School Leader Hua with 5 math tricks for young students based on percentages and multiplying and dividing. Okay, let's get started. So, first off, this math tip is about finding 10% of a number. A really easy way to find 10% is to just move the decimal place one place over. For example, this 35 has a decimal right here. You can move the decimal one place over, and that will give you the 10% value, which is 3.5. It's the same thing for bigger numbers, such as this 122. If you want to find 10% of that, just move the decimal point one slot over and you get 12.2. And that means that 12.2 is 1/10 of 122. Same thing for the number 50. Just move the decimal place one place over, you get the number 5, and you know that 5 is 10% of 50. And you can also always just test this. You can do 5 times 10 is equal to 50, and that will show you that it was right. You can do that for all of these numbers, by the way. For example, 3.5 times 10, it becomes 10 times larger, and you get 35. And same thing for even smaller numbers like this 1. Even if it's just one digit, just move the decimal place one place over, you get 0.1. That way you know that 10% of 1 is 0.1. Alright, let's move on to the next math tip. This tip is for finding 50% or 25%. To find 50%, you just divide by 2 or cut the number in half. For example, 170 divided by 2 is 85, so we know that 85 is 50% of 170. But you can take this further and cut it in half again to get 25% of the original number. So we can take this 85, we divide it by 2, we have 4250, and that's how we know that 170 divided by 4, or 25% of 170 that is 4250, and that's an easy way to find 25%. Oftentimes it's easier to divide by 2 in your head, so this helps. For example, if you need to find what is a 25% discount at a store, for example, you could divide by 2 and then divide by 2 again to get 25%. Alternatively, you can still just divide by 4, but that can sometimes be a little harder depending on the number. So knowing this can help a little bit. Alright, third tip now. Third tip is this one. X% of y is equal to y% of x. Alright, so basically that just means that when you have numbers like this, you can kind of move it around. And it's a little hard to understand this just by looking at this. So let's do an example. What is 7% of 25? So if 7% of 25, so 7 is the x and 25 is the y, and if you try to do that in your head right now, 7% of 25 might be a little bit hard, but we can switch it around a little bit to make it easier. 7% of 25 is 25% of 7, and then we can use the trick earlier that I mentioned about dividing twice to find 25%, remember? So 7 divided by 2 is 3.5, which is going to be the 50% of it. Alright, then 3.5 divided by 2 is 1.75 for 25%. So if you were trying to find 7% of 25, you would know that it's 1.75 if you do this trick, where you just kind of switch it, because it's easier to find 25% of 7 than 7% of 25. Alright, let's go to the next one. This one is multiplying by 9s. So this is a very specific example, but almost everyone has 10 fingers, so this is super useful if you're learning your multiplication tables, or you just forgot one for a second and you just need to do a quick small multiply by 9 count. So if you actually just count off the number of fingers, move that finger down, you'll get the value for the answer if you read the left hand and the left fingers and the right fingers. So just as an example, let's say that I wanted to do 9 times 4. Alright, I'm going to count out all my fingers. 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, so that ring finger I'm going to move down. Now I'll just look at the left numbers, so left fingers. So I have 1, 2, 3 on the left, so that's 3. And then on the right I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 on the right, so that's 36. So that means that 9 times 4 is 36. And this works for the other numbers too. Let's say that we want to do 9 times 7. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Move that down. And now I'll count the left side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And the right side. 1, 2, 3. And now I get 63. Because it's 6 on the left, 3 on the right, and the 7th finger is down. So 9 times 7, 63. And you can kind of use this as just a quick guideline for young children. Alright, and the final math tip is about divisibility rules. Let's go through these together. So if you want to find if a number is divisible by 2, you just check if the last digit is even. Remember, even digits are 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. So if the number ends in one of those, you know that it's divisible by 2. If you want to find if it's divisible by 3, you can add up all the numbers that you see in the digits, add up all the digits that is, and then see if it's divisible by 3. So for example, the number 21, we can add it up. 2 plus 1 is 3, and then 3 is divisible by 3, so that 21 is divisible by 3. Even if it was a number like, let's say, 321, we would add 3 plus 2 is 5, 5 plus 1 is 6, and 6 is divisible by 3, so that number is also divisible by 3, and so on. 4. In order to find if a number is divisible by 4, you can check the last two numbers and see if that's divisible by 4. So, for example, let's say the number 12. Alright, the number 12 is divisible by 4 because 3 times 4 is 12. But what if it's a really, really big number, like 412 or 5012? Well, those numbers end in 12, so those numbers are divisible by 4. Alright, 5s. 5s are pretty easy. You just have to look at the very last number and see if it ends in a 5 or a 0. And if it does, then it's divisible by 5. So numbers like 50, 100, 70, 65, 55, 1,000,005, 1,000,055, 1 billion because it ends in a 0, and so on and so forth. If it ends in 5 or 0, it's divisible by 5. Alright, and then 6. 6 is pretty easy. Just check if it's divisible by 2, which means if it's even, and if it's divisible by 3, which is by adding up the digits and seeing if it's divisible by 3. So basically the tip for 6 is to remember the tips for 2 and 3. This happens a lot in mathematics. The early things you learn are the building blocks and the fundamentals that will help you learn the later concepts. Alright, 7. So 7's a little bit trickier and it's a little easier to just see an example, but basically you have to double the last digit and then subtract the product from the rest of the number. I brought up an example here. So let's say is 2455 divisible by 7. Alright, you multiply the last digit by 2, so this last digit is 5. We're going to multiply that by 2, we get 10. Alright, and now we subtract the product from 245, which is the number that was left over once we've taken out this 5. And what do we get? We get 235. Is 235 a multiple of 7? We're not sure about that because, well, I mean, some people might be able to do that in their head, but most people wouldn't. We could just do this rule again. 235, take the 5, and multiply by 2, we get 10, and then subtract again, we get 13. Is 13 a multiple of 7? No, because it goes 7, 14, 21. So it stops there, and we know that that's not divisible by 7. And that's a way you can do it. This is a little bit more complicated, and it might just be better to just not do this and just do the math on paper. But if you want to know one of the tricks for 7, you can do that. Alright, 8, just like 7, it's a little bit harder. You might want to consider just doing if it's divisible by 8 on paper, but the trick for this is to just check the last 3 digits. And if those last 3 digits form a number that's divisible by 8, it's the whole number is divisible by 8. So this trick for 8 is actually really similar to the trick for 4, which looked at 2 numbers. But it's easier to look at 2 numbers, and it's a little harder to look at 8 numbers. To look at 3 digits, sorry, because 4 looked at the last 2 digits and 8 looks at the last 3 digits. It might be a little harder for that, so the tricks for 7 and 8, you might want to consider just using paper and pencil and just doing the math out completely. But just if you want a trick, you can keep those in mind. Alright, 9 goes back to being a pretty easy trick. You just have to add up all the digits and see if it's divisible by 9. So for example, is 72 divisible by 9? Well, we'll just add it up. 7 plus 2 is 9. And 9 is divisible by 9. What about the number 981? Is 981 divisible by 9? Well, we'll add it up. 9 plus 981, so 9 plus 8 is 17. 17 plus 1 is 18. 18 is divisible by 9. Or you could just go further. When you have 18, 1 plus 8 equals 9. That's divisible by 9. Alright, and 10 is very easy as well, just like 5, but instead of 5 or 0, just check if it ends in 0. So numbers like 20, 30, 50, 100, a million, 5,000, 6,750, and so on and so forth. If it ends in 0, it's divisible by 10. Alright, those are my 5 math tips. I hope that helped.